My hands shook as I gripped the edge of the table, the linen cool against my palms, and with one sharp yank, I sent plates of my blues-infused barbecue crashing to the floor of the Fairmont Hotel's Grand Ballroom in San Francisco. The shape of porcelain drowning out the blues band's wail and freezing 200 elite guests in their tracks. I'm Marcus Tate, a 42-year-old black chef from Memphis, Tennessee, and tonight, my food born from the soul of Beale Street was meant to be the heartbeat of a billionaire clean energy fundraiser. But Evelyn Warwick, a venture capitalist, with a smile like a blade, had pushed me too far. "You don't get to spit on my soul," I said, my voice trembling but iron, her smug grin faltering as the room held its breath. I'd fought my whole life to stand here, but her taunts, slicing at my team and my heritage, had lit a fire I couldn't douse. How did it come to this? My mind raced back to the start of the night, the weight of every choice leading to this moment, knowing one wrong move could cost me everything I'd built. I'd been in the kitchen hours earlier, the air thick with the smoky tang of my slow-cooked ribs. My team of 40 mostly black and Latino faces moving like a band in sync, each note of their work hitting just right. Lila, my sous chef, adjusted the glaze on our cornbread, her steady hands hiding the scars of a life that hadn't been kind, her quiet strength a rock I leaned on. Jamal, a 23-year-old server with dreams of opening his own spot, darted between stations, his ambition shining through his quick smile, despite the nerves of his first big gala. This wasn't just a job, it was our chance to prove we belonged in a world that rarely welcomed us. I'd started with a food cart in Memphis, slinging ribs to blues fans, turning skeptics into believers with every bite. My grandmother, Hattie, voice still guided me, her hands kneading dough in our cramped kitchen, saying, "Cook with your blues, Marcus. Let M feel your heart." That heart was in every dish tonight, in the music and food mentorship I ran for at-risk kids in Oakland, teaching them to channel pain into art. But as I checked the ribs, a sharp laugh from the ballroom cut through the kitchen's rhythm, cold and familiar, like the slurs I'd heard as a kid in Memphis. The laugh belonged to Evelyn Warwick, a venture capitalist whose icy blonde hair and tailored suit screamed untouchable power, flanked by Roland Hayes, a tech CEO with a fake smile, and two male investors whose cufflinks gleamed like their arrogance. Evelyn's reputation preceded her: ruthless, charming, and known for crushing anyone who crossed her. Her table was a stage, her voice carrying as she said, "Barbecue, bit low rent for the Fairmont, isn't it?" The words hit like a jab, but I kept stirring the sauce, my jaw tight. I'd faced this before: clients who saw my skin and assumed my food was street, not art. At my first big gig in Nashville, a guest had called me boy and refused my plate, and I'd served him anyway, swallowing the sting. But tonight, with my team's pride and my mentorship's funding on the line, I wasn't that 20-something anymore. I caught Jamal's eye, his shoulders stiff as he refilled glasses, and Lila's, her lips pressed thin as she plated appetizers. They deserved better than this. Evelyn's group didn't let up. They strolled into the kitchen uninvited, Evelyn leading like she owned every inch of the place, her heels clicking like a metronome. "So, this is the blues barbecue experiment," she said, her tone mocking, eyes scanning my pots and my team's focused faces. "Smells curious." I stepped forward, my chef's coat crisp, my voice steady. "It's Memphis ribs. Ms. Warwick served at events bigger than this." My eyes held hers, daring her to push. Roland smirked, adjusting his tie. "Bigger, like a street festival in Tennessee." The investors chuckled, their laughter scraping my nerves. Jamal froze, his tray wobbling, and Lila's knife paused mid-chop, her restraint fraying. "We've served the Essence Festival," I said, my smile sharp. "Every dish here's crafted to sing. Care to try one?" I gestured to a tray of cornbread bites, their honey glaze catching the light. Evelyn waved a hand, dismissive. "I'll judge the main course if it's not to dive bar." The word landed like a slap, and I felt my team's eyes on me, their trust urging me to hold steady. I turned to the ribs, their smoky heat mirroring the anger in my chest. I thought of Hattie, her voice a melody over the hum of our Memphis kitchen, teaching me to cook with the blues paint and joy in every bite. That blues was in my food, in the mentorship where I taught kids to turn anger into music and meals, giving them a stage like the one I'd fought for. But Evelyn's voice broke through again, louder from her table. "The blues band's strum no match for her. Let's hope the chef doesn't fumble under pressure," she said, Roland's laugh cutting deep. Jamal approached, his voice low. "They're back, Mr. Tate. They want to inspect the kitchen again." My stomach twisted. This wasn't about the food, it was a game, a way to remind me I was an outsider. I wiped my hands, steeling myself. "Let M come," I said, but my pulse raced. I saw Hattie's face, her strength, my shield. I wouldn't let them break us. Evelyn swept in again, Roland and the investors trailing their presence a cold front. "Just checking on our back alley menu," Evelyn said, lingering on back alley like a taunt. I stepped in front of Jamal, shielding him. "On schedule, Ms. Warwick, ribs and cornbread, crafted with soul." "You'll taste it soon," I said, my smile tight, my heart pounding. Evelyn tilted her head, studying me like, "Pray soul, that's ambitious for this." She gestured at the kitchen, her rings glinting. One investor, a wiry man with a smug grin, snorted. Memphis vibes, more suited to a juke joint. Evelyn leaned against the counter, her eyes sharp. Let's hope it's not too gritty. The word hit like a fist, and Leela's knife clinked, loudly, her eyes flashing. I shot her a glance. Hold it. I turned to Evelyn, forcing calm. My cuisine's world class, like my team. Anything else? My words were polite, but the challenge was clear. Evelyn's smile curled. Venomous, just ensuring you're up to the task, chef. This isn't your little food cart. Her words dragged me back to Memphis, my food cart parked on Beale Street, where I'd served ribs to blues legends and doubters alike, proving my worth one plate at a time. I'd built my name despite whispers a black man cooking this, and turned them into cheers. But Evelyn's eyes said I was nothing here. She wandered to Jamal's station, picking up a glass, then letting it slip, water splashing his uniform. Oops, she said, laughing. You're used to mopping up, right, kid? Jamal froze, his face burning, the tray trembling. My blood surged. I stepped to him, steadying his tray. Go change, I whispered, my voice firm but warm. He nodded, eyes wet, and slipped away. I turned to Evelyn, my calm cracking. That was out of line. My team deserves respect. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. Respect for the help. Roland chuckled, clapping an investor's shoulder. He's got fire, I'll give him that. Their laughter clawed at me, and I wanted to scream, to shut them down. But the gala stakes loomed. Host Julian Vance's guests, my team's jobs, my mentorship's future, all hanging in the balance. I turned to the ribs, their heat grounding me. We keep going, I said, loud enough for my team to hear. They don't get to win. But Evelyn had one more move. Serve our table yourself, she called, her tone a command. Let's see if you can handle it without tripping. Her eyes gleamed, daring me. My heart thundered, Hattie's voice fighting the rage inside. Don't let M pull you down, she'd said. I gripped the tongs, knuckles white. Fine, I said, my voice steady but burning. I'll serve you myself. I grabbed a tray of ribs, my team watching, their trust my anchor. As I stepped toward the ballroom, Evelyn's smile followed, a promise of worse to come. The blues band's wail echoed, and I felt the fire I'd held back all night flare, ready to spill over. I'd serve them, but they'd taste more than my food. They'd taste my defiance, and I wasn't sure I could stop what came next. The plane touched down at Boston Logan International Airport, the hum of the engines fading as my bruised wrist pulsed beneath the bandage Dr. Patel had applied. My lips stitched temporarily with a butterfly closure, stung with every word I spoke, but the pain was secondary to the fire in my chest. I was Elliot Morgan, a 42-year-old black man who'd just been assaulted by American Horizon's crew for daring to sit in first-class seat 1A, a seat I'd earned not just with my ticket but with a 45% ownership stake in the airline itself. As I gathered my bag, the weight of #HorizonHorror-now at 2 million posts and climbing pressed against me. Passengers whispered, their phones still glowing with videos of my humiliation, my bloodied lip, and the moment I'd handed Victor Ramsey my platinum ownership card, shattering his smug certainty. I'd wanted to stay invisible, to observe Horizon's flaws quietly, but that anonymity was gone, replaced by a spotlight I hadn't chosen yet. As I stepped onto the jet bridge, greeted by a swarm of reporters shouting questions, Mr. Morgan, will you sue? Is Horizon racist? I felt my father's union songs rise in my throat, urging me to turn this wound into a weapon for change. The terminal was chaos, a sea of cameras and microphones, but my mind drifted to Oakland, to the 650-square apartment where I'd grown up, the walls vibrating with my father's baritone singing Solidarity Forever. He'd been a bus driver, his hands calloused from long shifts, his heart scarred from slurs hurled by passengers who saw his blackness as a threat. Elliot, he'd say, his eyes tired but fierce. They'll try to break you, but you build something bigger than their hate. At 10, I didn't fully grasp his words, but I saw his strength in the way he organized drivers for better wages, risking his job to demand dignity. His union songbook, dog-eared and coffee-stained, sat on our kitchen table, its pages my first lessons in resistance. I'd traced the lyrics, dreaming of a world where fairness wasn't a fight. Now, standing in Boston's glare, my wrist aching from Victor's grip, I realized I'd been building that world first with my Solartech empire, then with Horizon, and now, in this moment, with a story that could rewrite an industry. Tara Nguyen, the nurse who'd stood up for me on the flight, caught my eye through the crowd. Her scrub top was wrinkled, her face etched with resolve. Mr. Morgan, she said, pushing past a reporter, I just wanted to check on you. That was unreal. Her voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen too many battles, her Vietnamese heritage a bridge to my own struggles. I smiled, wincing as my lip tugged at the bandage. Call me Elliot. And thank you, Tara. You didn't have to speak up, but you did. She shrugged, her eyes softening. I'm an ER nurse. I've seen black patients ignored, dismissed. Silence isn't an option anymore. Her words hit deep, reminding me of my cousin, a nurse who'd quit after years of being passed over for promotions. Tara handed me her card, her handwriting neat. Tara Nguyen RN, Boston General. If you need anything, I'm here, she said. I nodded, pocketing the card, already sensing she'd be more than a bystander in this fight. The reporters closed in, their questions a barrage, but my assistant, Leo, appeared, his tablet glowing with updates. At 29, Leo was a tech prodigy, his loyalty to me forged in the early days of my startup. Elliot, it's a firestorm, he whispered, guiding me through security. Stocks down 8%, the board's panicking, and there's a TikTok challenge hashtag bias busted where people are sharing their own stories of discrimination. At 3 million views I exhaled, the scale of it sinking in. My story wasn't just mine anymore. It was a spark for others, like the walkouts I'd led at 16 against unfair school policies, chanting for justice in Oakland streets. But this was bigger, messier. Victor's face flashed in my mind, his sneer, his certainty that I didn't belong. He wasn't just a rogue employee. He was a symptom of a system that let men like him thrive, his 25 years at Horizon shielding him from accountability. His personnel file, which I'd studied, hinted at a man shaped by a childhood in a sundown town, his biases calcified by a company that rewarded his order over empathy. I wanted to hate him, but hate was too small. I needed to dismantle the structure that made him possible. Leo led me to a waiting SUV, the Boston skyline blurring past as we headed to a hospital for my wrist and lip. In the quiet, I thought of my first coding project at 14, a solar panel optimizer hacked together in a community center's outdated computer lab. My father had beamed, his union pride in my work a quiet revolution. You're building power, son, he'd said. By 30, I'd turned that code into a $6 billion company, revolutionizing clean energy. When Horizon faced bankruptcy, I'd bought 45% of its shares, drawn to its potential to connect people, not divide them. I'd stayed silent, flying as a regular passenger to see the truth of how black travelers were questioned, how women of color were ignored. The data I'd collected, 35% of ground staff were people of color, but only 5% of executives, burned in my mind. Victor's assault was no anomaly. It was the inevitable result of a culture that let bias fester unchecked. At the hospital, doctor confirmed a mild wrist sprain and stitched my lip, the needle's prick a reminder of the stakes. Tara's words echoed, silence isn't an option. As I left, bandaged but unbowed, I spotted a group of teens outside, their phones out, filming a hashtag bias busted video. We're with you, Elliot, one shouted, a black girl with braids, her voice fierce. I waved, my throat tight. They reminded me of myself at their age, marching in Oakland, believing change was possible. On impulse, I approached them. What's your story? I asked the girl. Aisha hesitated, then spoke. My mum was kicked out of a store last week. Said she looked suspicious. We're tired of it. Her friends nodded, their anger raw but hopeful. I saw my father in there. AI's his songs about standing tall. Keep telling those stories, I said. They're your power. Aisha grinned, uploading her video, and I knew this movement was theirs as much as mine. Leo drove me to a community center in Roxbury where I'd agreed to host an impromptu tech workshop for local youth, a plan I'd hatched mid-flight to channel this chaos into something tangible. The center was a squat brick building, its walls covered in murals of Boston's black history. Inside, 20 kids, mostly black and Latino, waited, their eyes wide as I walked in, my bandaged wrist and stitched lip a stark contrast to my denim jacket. I'm Elliot Morgan, I said, setting up my laptop. Today, we're coding an app to track bias incidents anonymously safely. The kids leaned in, curious. One, Jamal, a lanky 15-year-old, raised his hand. You're the guy from the plane, right? Why didn't you just sue them? I smiled, my lip aching. Suing's one path, Jamal, but I want to fix the system, not just punish it. Coding's how I fight, building tools to give us a voice. His nod was slow, thoughtful, and I saw a spark of my younger self in him. As we coded, I shared my story, not the billionaire version, but the Oakland kid who'd soldered circuits in a basement, dreaming of solar fields. I told them about my father, arrested for loitering outside our home, his union songs keeping him whole. He taught me that power isn't money, I said, helping Aisha debug her code. It's what you do with it. The kids worked fast, their app taking shape, a simple interface to report bias, with a map to show patterns. Tara arrived midway, volunteering to mentor. No coder, she said, laughing, but I know how to listen. Her presence grounded the room, her stories of ignored patients mirroring my own data on Horizon's disparities. One girl, Sophia, shared how her dad, a janitor, was overlooked for promotions. This app could help him, she said, her voice soft but fierce. I nodded, my heart swelling. This was why I'd fought, not for 1A, but for Sophia, Jamal, Aisha. The workshop ended, but the energy lingered. Tara pulled me aside. I was on that flight because I'm testifying at a healthcare equity hearing tomorrow, she said. What? That happened to you? It's the same fight. Her words struck deep. She wasn't just a nurse. She was an advocate. Her testimony a parallel to my own battle with Horizon. Join me, I said. An idea forming. I'm meeting the board tomorrow. Your voice could shift things. She hesitated, then nodded. Let's do it. As we left, Leo showed me the latest. #bias busted had hit 5 million views. With stories flooding in Latinx, travelers searched at airports, Asian women ignored in lounges. Victor's name trended too. His Channel 5 interview claiming he followed protocol and I was aggressive. His lie stung, but the video's 12 angles crystal clear exposed him. He wasn't the villain. He was a cog in a machine I'd vowed to rewire. Driving to my hotel, Boston's lights blurring past, I thought of Victor's sneer, his need to control rooted in a fear of losing his place. He'd never see me as equal, not because of me, but because of a system that led him to define worth by skin. My father's songbook had a line I'd forgotten. No chain is stronger than its weakest link. Victor was that link, but Horizon was the chain. And I'd spent years forging my own through code, through deals, through silent shares. At 16, I'd led a walkout, my voice hoarse from chanting. At 30, I'd built a solar empire, powering homes across California. Now at 42, I held 45% of an airline, and with Tara's courage, Aisha's fire, and 2 million voices online, I was ready to break that chain. Tomorrow, I'd face Horizon's board, not as a victim but as a force. My father's songs, my battle cry, my bruised wrist a badge of what I'd survived and what I'd changed. The glass elevator climbed the 30-story tower of American Horizon's headquarters in New York City. My reflection staring back at Meliot Morgan, a 42-year-old black man with a bandaged wrist and a stitched lip. The scars of yesterday's assault on a Phoenix to Boston flight still raw. My denim jacket felt out of place against the sleek chrome, but my resolve was ironclad. I'd built a $6 billion solar tech empire, owned 45% of this airline, and now, with #Horizon Horror trending at 3 million posts, I was here to confront the board, not as a victim but as a force to dismantle the systemic racism that had bruised my body and countless others. Tara Nguyen, the nurse who'd stood up for me on the flight, stood beside me, her scrub top swapped for a blazer, her eyes steady with purpose. My assistant Leo clutched his tablet, his face tense with updates. The stock was down 10%, and Victor Ramsey, the flight attendant who'd assaulted me, was doubling down on TV, claiming I'd provoked him. My father's union songs echoed in my mind, "Ain't nobody gonna turn me round," fueling me as the doors opened to a conference room where Horizon's future would be rewritten. The room was a fortress of power. A massive oak table, ringed by executives in tailored suits, their faces a mix of anxiety and defensiveness. On a wall-sized screen, board members' video feeds flickered, their expressions unreadable. CEO Elizabeth Grant, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, rose to greet me, her handshake firm but her smile strained. "Elliot, we're horrified by what happened," she said, her voice polished, avoiding my bandaged wrist. Board chair Robert Ellison, a 70-year-old with a silver mane and a Wall Street pedigree, nodded gravely from his screen. "We've suspended those involved," he said, "and we're prepared to compensate you." His tone suggested closure, a quick fix to make this go away. I felt a surge of anger, not at their words but at their assumption that money could erase the blood on my lip, the bruises on my wrists, or the decades of indignities I'd carried since Oakland. "I'm not here for compensation," I said, my voice low but cutting. "I'm here to fix a system that let Victor Ramsey think he could drag me from my seat because of my skin." Victor's name hung in the air, a ghost of the confrontation. I'd learned more about him since landing his interviews on Channel 7, painting himself as a victim of protocol enforcement. His 25-year career at Horizon marked by complaints of bias swept under the rug. He wasn't just a man. He was a symbol of a culture that rewarded gatekeepers who upheld an invisible hierarchy, one where black passengers like me were intruders in first class. His childhood in a segregated Ohio town had shaped his lens, but Horizon's failure to challenge it made him dangerous. I saw him in my mind's eye. His sneer as he grabbed my wrist, his certainty rooted in a system that never questioned his authority. But I wasn't here to vilify him alone. I was here to break the machine that empowered him. I nodded to Leo, who connected his tablet to the room's projector. A slide appeared, stark and undeniable. Horizon's workforce data, compiled over 3 years of my silent audits as a shareholder. "Look at this," I said, pointing to the numbers. 35% of your ground staff are people of color, yet only 5% of your executives are black. Passengers are 3 times more likely to be questioned about their tickets than white ones. The room shifted, some executives glancing away, others leaning forward. Elizabeth's brow furrowed, but Robert's face hardened, his voice clipped. "These are serious claims, Mr. Morgan. But one incident doesn't indict an entire company." I met his gaze, unflinching. "This isn't one incident, it's a pattern. I've flown Horizon 50 times, documenting every time a black passenger was verified or a woman of color was ignored. Victor Ramsey didn't act alone, he acted on a culture you've allowed to fester." Tara stepped forward, her presence grounding me. "I'm Tara Nguyen, a nurse and passenger on that flight. she said, her voice steady. I saw Elliot. Valid ticket ignored, his body bruised, because your crew assumed he didn't belong. I see the same in hospitals. Black patients dismissed, their pain minimized. This isn't isolated, it's systemic. Her words landed like a spark, igniting murmurs among the executives. I thought of my cousin, her nursing career stalled by bias, and felt a surge of gratitude for Tara's courage. She wasn't just an ally, she was a mirror, reflecting the broader fight. I pulled up a new slide, a heat map of passenger complaints, red zones flaring where Black and Latino travelers reported unfair treatment. This is your reality, I said. Your policies say equity, but your actions say otherwise. To drive it home, I unveiled a new tool I'd developed with my tech team, a virtual reality simulation, built from my data, immersing users in the perspective of a profiled passenger. I handed VR headsets to Elizabeth and a few executives, their faces skeptical but curious. Put these on, I said. Feel what it's like to be me yesterday. The simulation started. A black man boards first class, faces suspicious glances. Here's Victor's sharp boarding pass. The executives flinched as the VR crew questioned their ticket, their tone dripping with doubt. One executive, a younger woman named Claire, gasped as the simulation showed hands grabbing her arms, dragging her from her seat. This is awful, she whispered, removing the headset, her eyes wet. Robert, watching on his screen, scoffed. This is dramatic. Elliot, we have anti-discrimination policies. I shook my head. Policies you haven't audited in years. When did you last test how your staff treat diverse passengers? Never. The room fell silent. My words a challenge they couldn't dodge. Laid out my reform plan, a 50-page blueprint I'd refined since buying my Horizon shares. Mandatory bias training with real scenarios, not checkbox videos, I said. A diversity task force with teeth, reporting directly to the board. A customer equity board to handle complaints independently, and a complete leadership review with those who protected Victor Ramsey. Elizabeth nodded slowly, but Robert's voice cut through. This feels like a takeover, Mr. Morgan. We're a business, not a social experiment. His words stung, echoing the boardroom battles I'd fought in my 20s, when investors dismissed my solar tech as too idealistic. I leaned forward, my wrist throbbing. I own 45% of this company. Robert, this isn't a takeover, it's accountability. Your stock's down 10% because of a culture you ignored. Fix it, or the next drop will be worse. The room tensed, executives exchanging glances. Claire spoke up, her voice tentative but firm. I've seen complaints cross my desk, passengers of color ignored, staff promotions skewed. I thought it was isolated, but this data. She trailed off, looking at my slides. Another executive, a former pilot named Daniel Ortiz, nodded. I've flown for Horizon 20 years. I've seen crew treat passengers differently subtly, but it's there. I should have spoken up sooner. His admission, raw and unexpected, shifted the room's energy. I thought of my father, his union meetings where one voice could tip the scales. Daniel's support was a crack in the wall, but Robert wasn't swayed. You're asking for upheaval, he said, his screen looming large. Shareholders won't stand for it. I smiled, my lip aching. I am the shareholder, Robert, and I'm telling you, this is how we survived. To amplify the stakes, I introduced my equity pledge campaign, a public commitment I'd drafted overnight. Starting tomorrow, I said, we'll invite passengers to hold Horizon accountable via social media, sharing their experiences with #EquityPledge. We'll publish our reform progress monthly, transparency, not lip service. Leo projected a mock-up of the campaign's website, clean and bold, with a live tracker for bias complaints. Tara added, this could set a standard for industries beyond airlines, hospitals, schools. People want to be heard. Her words carried the weight of her healthcare equity fight, a reminder that this was bigger than Horizon. I thought of Aisha, the teen from Roxbury, her #bias-busted video now at 1 million views. This wasn't just my fight, it was hers, Tara's, Daniel's. Robert pushed back, his voice sharp. This is coercive, Elliot. A committee could review these ideas gradually. I cut him off, my voice rising for the first time. Gradual is what got us here. Every day you delay, another passenger is humiliated. I was dragged from my seat, bloodied, because your gradual failed. I touched my lip, the bandage a silent witness. The room stilled, Claire's eyes locked on me, Daniel nodding slowly. Elizabeth spoke, her tone measured. Elliot's data is undeniable. His plan is bold, but it's what we need. I propose we vote. Robert's face darkened, but he called for the vote, his reluctance palpable. One by one, hands rose. Daniel, others swayed by the VR demo and the trending scandal. Robert abstained, his silence a defeat. My plan passed, not unanimous but enough. My 45% stake, the hammer that sealed it. 6 months after Victor Ramsey's hands bruised my wrist and split my lip on that American Horizon flight, I stood at a podium in Dallas, the renovated training academy buzzing with 300 new flight attendants. their faces a vibrant mosaic of America. As Elliot Morgan, now board co-chair of the airline I owned 45% of, I felt the weight of my journey from an Oakland kid coding in a basement to a 42-year-old black man reshaping an industry. The scar on my lip, faint but ever-present, was a quiet reminder of the day I'd turned pain into purpose. Hashtag Horizon Horror had faded from the headlines, replaced by hashtag Equity Pledge, now at 10 million posts. A movement I'd sparked to hold Horizon accountable. Victor's sneer still haunted me, not because of his malice but because he represented a system I was determined to dismantle. My father's union songs echoed in my chest, "We shall overcome," as I surveyed the recruits, their uniforms crisp, their training steeped in a new ethos of equity. This wasn't just a job for them, it was a mission, one I'd fought to make real, and as I prepared to speak, I knew every word would carry the hopes of those who'd been unseen, like me, in first class. The academy's walls, once sterile, now glowed with murals of diverse travelers, a visual pledge to the culture we were building. I'd pushed through reforms that transformed Horizon from the inside out, mandatory bias training with role plays drawn from real passenger complaints, an AI-driven system to flag discriminatory crew behavior in real time, and a community outreach program offering free flights to underserved youth. The data was clear: customer satisfaction had surged 25%, with Black and Latino passengers reporting feeling respected for the first time. Our stock, once down 10%, had climbed 15% above its pre-incident peak, proof that doing right was good business. But the victory felt hollow when I thought of Victor, whose termination hadn't ended his influence. He'd become a minor media figure, speaking at fringe events, claiming he was cancelled for following rules. His narrative, built on half-truths, fed a small but loud group who saw Horizon's changes as overreach. I'd learned more about him, a man whose fear of losing control stemmed from a life where authority was his only currency, enabled by a company that never challenged his biases. He wasn't the root of Horizon's problems, but he was their loudest echo, and I needed to counter his voice with action. "Welcome," I began, my voice steady despite the faint ache in my lip. "You're the first class to graduate from a program that doesn't just teach service, it teaches humanity." The recruits leaned forward, their diversity striking: Black, Latino, Asian, white, young and older, each trained to see passengers as individuals, not stereotypes. I thought of Tara Nguyen, now leading our passenger equity board, her nurse's empathy shaping policies that gave travelers a voice. She sat in the front row, her blazer sharp, her smile, a quiet nod of solidarity. 6 months ago I said I was dragged from seat 1A because of my skin. That wasn't an accident, it was the result of a culture that let bias thrive. You're here to change that. A young recruit, Malik, raised his hand. "Mr. Morgan, how do we make sure we don't slip back?" His question hit deep, echoing my own fears. I'd seen companies backslide, their reforms fading once the spotlight dimmed. "Accountability," I said. "We've built systems AI to monitor interactions, a passenger hotline, and you trained to call out bias when you see it. But it starts with your heart." To make it real, I'd launched Horizon Voices, a podcast featuring employees and passengers sharing stories of bias and redemption. The first episode aired last month, featured Daniel Ortiz, the former pilot who'd backed me in the boardroom. He'd spoken candidly about witnessing crew favoritism, his regret for staying silent, and his pride in Horizon's new path. The podcast had 2 million downloads, its raw honesty resonating with our 25 to 55 audience, who craved authenticity. I played a clip for the recruits. A passenger, Maria, a Latina mother, described being ignored in first class until she complained loudly, only to be labeled difficult. "That's the culture we're ending," I said, pausing the audio. "Maria's story is why we've installed AI cameras on flights, flagging when crew skip certain passengers for service. It's why you've trained in de-escalation, not confrontation." Malik nodded, his eyes fierce, and I saw my younger self in him, the kid who'd coded to fight inequity. The reforms weren't just internal. I'd launched a Fly Equal Summit, a first-of-its-kind event set for next month in Dallas, inviting other airlines to share equity strategies. Delta and United had signed on, inspired by Horizon's rebound. The summit would feature Tara's passenger equity board, showcasing our anonymous reporting app, built with the Roxbury teens I'd mentored. Aisha, the teen who'd shouted my name in Boston, was presenting her app update, her voice now a national force. I'd also started a veteran hiring program, led by Jamal Carter, the passenger who'd recorded my assault. Jamal, now a Horizon trainer, stood at the back, his military jacket replaced by a company polo, his discipline shaping recruits into advocates. "Equity isn't a buzzword," he'd told me yesterday. "It's a mission, like any deployment." His program had hired 50 veterans, their diverse backgrounds, strengthening our crew. I felt my father's pride in my chest, his union spirit alive in these changes. But not everyone embraced the shift. Harold Weiss, the passenger who'd dismissed me on a flight, had written a viral letter, published in the Dallas Morning News, titled, "My Mistake." He admitted his discomfort at seeing me in first class. his assumption I didn't belong rooted in biases he hadn't questioned. "I was wrong," he wrote, "and I'm learning." The letter sparked thousands of online confessions, people confronting their prejudices, a ripple effect that moved me deeply. Yet, Victor's voice lingered. His latest speech at a small convention claiming Horizon's reforms were punishing good employees. His words, amplified by divisive media, stoked fear among some staff who whispered about overreach in anonymous forums. I didn't hate Victor, I pitied his refusal to grow, his identity tied to a fading world where he could decide who belonged, but pity wouldn't stop me. I'd invited him to a private meeting last month, hoping for accountability. He'd refused, doubling down on his protocol defense. His defiance, a reminder that systems change faster than hearts. The ceremony continued. I shared a new initiative, Sky Kids, a program flying underserved youth to STEM camps across the U.S., starting with 100 kids from Dallas next week. I'd named it after my father, whose union songs had taught me to lift others up. "You'll meet these kids," I told the recruits. "They're your why. You check your biases, why you serve every passenger equally." A recruit, Sophia, the daughter of a janitor from Part 2, stood up. "My dad flew Horizon last week," she said, her voice trembling. For the first time he felt seen. "Thank you." Her words hit like a wave, my throat tightening. I thought of my cousin, her nursing dreams crushed by bias, and knew Sophia's dad was why I'd fought. The recruits applauded, their energy electric. But I felt the weight of Victor's shadow, his resistance, a warning that change was fragile. Tara approached after, her eyes bright. "This academy, it's a beacon," she said, "but Victor's out there, twisting the narrative. How do you keep going?" I touched my lip scar, a habit now. "By remembering why I started," I said. "My father faced worse and still sang. I can't stop because of one man's lies." She nodded, her resolve mirroring mine. Jamal joined us, his trainer badge gleaming. "The veterans I'm training there all in," he said. "They see this as duty." Their support anchored me, but Victor's media campaign gnawed at my resolve. He wasn't just a fired attendant. He was a rallying cry for those who feared change. His story a distorted mirror of mine. I'd countered with Transparency monthly equity reports, the podcast, the summit, but his voice tested my patience, my faith in progress. That is, the recruits dispersed. I stood alone, looking at a mural of a diverse crew serving passengers, a vision I'd fought for. My wrist, healed but stiff, reminded me of the cost. Victor's latest interview had aired this morning, claiming I'd weaponized my wealth to ruin him. His words stung. Not because they were true, but because they exposed the gap between Horizon's new path and the world's resistance. My father's songbook had a line, "Keep your eyes on the prize." The prize wasn't just a better airline, it was a world where no one needed a platinum card to be treated with dignity. I'd won the boardroom, but Victor's defiance, Harold's letter, and Sophia's gratitude showed me the real fight was ongoing, heart by heart, flight by flight. As I left for the airport, bound for a planning meeting for the Fly Equal Summit, I knew this wasn't the end. It was a beginning, one where every passenger's story, from Sophia's dad to Aisha's mom, would fuel a revolution I'd carry forward, no matter how loud Victor's lies grew. The hum of the American Horizon flight from Miami to Chicago felt different as I settled into seat 1A. The scar on my lip, a faint reminder of the day 6 months ago when Victor Ramsey's grip had drawn blood, his assumption that a black man didn't belong in first class, igniting a fire that still burned. I was Elliot Morgan, 42, a Solartech billionaire turned co-chair of this airline. My 45% stake, a lever I'd used to rewrite its soul. The cabin buzzed with a new warmth. Attendants greeted every passenger, from the black businessman beside me to the Latina family in economy, with equal respect, a testament to the reforms I'd bled for. My wrist, once bruised, was healed, but the scar on my lip, barely visible, anchored me to that moment of defiance when I'd handed Victor my platinum ownership card, turning his world upside down. My phone glowed with the Horizon app's Fair feature, a tool letting passengers report bias anonymously, its data fueling our AI-driven equity system. As we taxied for takeoff, my father's union songs, "We Shall Not Be Moved," sang in my chest, carrying me toward Oakland, where the Morgan Equity Hub's opening would mark a new chapter, not just for me but for every passenger who'd ever been unseen. The attendant, Kayla, a young black woman from our Dallas academy, approached with a smile. "Mr. Morgan, it's an honor," she said, her badge gleaming, her training in equity as sharp as her service skills. "The honor's yours." "Kayla," I replied, my lips scarred, tugging as I smiled. "You're making this airline what it should be." She nodded, serving a white retiree with the same care, a shift from the suspicion I'd faced. Victor Ramsey's shadow lingered, though his Flight Truth podcast, now with 700,000 downloads, painted me as a tyrant who'd weaponized wealth to ruin him. His latest episode, aired yesterday, claimed Horizon's reforms punished hard-working employees, his voice a slick mix of victimhood and defiance. Victor wasn't just a fired attendant. He was a relic of a system that let bias thrive. His childhood in a segregated Ohio town hardening his need to gatekeep spaces like first class, I'd offered him a public dialogue at our Fly Equals summit, but his refusal showed his truth. Change scared him more than accountability. My father's words cut through. Some fight progress because it's their only shield. I wasn't fighting Victor. I was building beyond him. The flight was smooth, Chicago's skyline glinting as I prepared for the hub's opening in Oakland, a center named for my father, whose union songs had taught me to build justice, not just demand. The hub would offer tech training, aviation scholarships, and a space for youth to dream, like I had in a 650-square-foot Oakland apartment, coding on a library's ancient PC. I'd partnered with Howard, Spellman, and Morehouse, committing $12 million to internships for black aviators and engineers. Inspired by Aisha, the Roxbury teen whose #BiasBusted video had sparked a movement, her bias tracking app, now with 1.5 million downloads, mapped stories of prejudice and hope across the U.S. Tara Nguyen, leading our passenger equity board, had processed 3,000 complaints, each one a step toward fairness. Her healthcare equity testimony had pushed me to see this as a cross-industry fight. Her text last night ringing clear: "You're rewriting rules everywhere, Elliot." As we descended, I reviewed a script for Lena's Flight, a TV special airing next week, named for my mother, a Motown backup singer whose resilience echoed in my bones. The special would showcase passengers, employees, and me, Proving Horizons reforms AI monitoring, the summit, Sky Kids were changing lives. At Chicago O'Hare, a small crowd greeted me, their signs bold. Equity soars with Elliot. Malik, the recruit from the Dallas Academy, joined me, his eyes bright. "I'm heading to Oakland for the hub," he said, his Horizon badge a symbol of his Southside dreams. "I want to fly one day." I clapped his shoulder, my throat tight. "You will, Malik. You're why I did this." His grin mirrored my own at 16, leading walkouts against unfair school policies. We boarded a connecting flight, and he shared his story growing up in Chicago's toughest neighborhood, coding in a rec center, inspired by my viral fight. "Your scar," he said, pointing to my lip, "it's like a badge." I nodded, thinking of my cousin. Her nursing career stalled. By biased and knew Malik's dreams were my why. In Oakland, the hub awaited, its glass walls etched with my father's lyric, "The arc of justice bends when we push." I was ready to push harder. The hub's opening drew 600 people, youth families, HBCU leaders, and Tara, who'd flown in to speak. Aisha took the stage, her voice a force. "This app isn't just code, it's our fight," she said, her 1.5 million users cheering. I followed, my lips a quiet anchor. "This hub is for my father," I said, "who sang for justice when the world tried to silence him. It's for every kid who dreams of wings, every passenger who deserves dignity." I unveiled a flight simulator, funded by our HBCU partners, where Malik would train, and announced a $12 million scholarship fund, met with roars. Tara spoke, her nurse's heart shining. "Elliot didn't just change Horizon, he showed us how to change systems." Her words hit deep, my chest swelling with pride for her, for Aisha, for Jamal Carter, whose veteran hiring program had brought 120 new faces to Horizon, their discipline shaping a culture of fairness. Victor's voice, Lingard, his latest podcast accusing the hub of dividing communities, his 700,000 listeners, a vocal minority, saw equity as loss. But his refusal to face me at the summit showed his weakness. I thought of Ellen, the retiree who'd confessed her bias at the hub's opening, her tears a counterpoint to Victor's lies. "I judged people like you," she'd said, her voice raw. "Your fight opened my eyes." Her words, echoed by thousands online, were a tide Victor couldn't stem. Other airlines, American, Alaska, had joined our Fly Equal summit, adopting our reforms, their CEOs citing Horizon's 20% customer satisfaction spike. The TV special, trending before its air date, featured Jamal training recruits, Aisha's app saving lives, and Sophia's father, the janitor, flying with pride. Each story was a brick in the world I was building, one where dignity wasn't tied to a platinum card. As night fell in Oakland, I stood outside the hub, the city's lights mirroring my hope. My phone buzzed with clips from Lena's Flight, its message clear: "Change starts with one voice but grows with many." I thought of my journey from an Oakland kid soldering circuits to a billionaire forcing an industry to reckon with its biases. The scar on my lip, my wrist's faint ache, were proof of the cost, but also the triumph. I'd learned lessons my father's songs couldn't teach, that power wielded with purpose can bend systems, that allies like Tara, Jamal, and Aisha make the fight stronger, that silence is complicity, but speaking up, even quietly, can spark a revolution. Victor's defiance, Elon's redemption, Malik's dreams, they showed me change is messy but possible. I looked at the hub's etched words, my father's lyric, a promise kept. "If you were in my shoes, facing racial and gender stereotyping, judged without your ID checked, how would you respond? Would you stay quiet, or would you, like me, use a calm, powerful response to demand justice, not just for yourself but for everyone? The answer lies in your voice, your choice, your fight." As I boarded a flight back to Miami, Kayla's smile greeting me. I knew this wasn't the end, it was a new sky where every passenger could soar free.